and content creation and even trailers for brands, not even just in games, but across the whole creative and tech sector as a whole. And yeah, it just grew and grew and grew really as I continued to grow and grow. What started off as a hobby project basically became a full-fledged business by the time I was 26, and it's just been amplifying it and growing it ever further since.
That sounds amazing, man. And it just sounds like it's still growing. It's gonna keep growing. I just saw today on Instagram that Steve Jobs, what he founded Apple when he was 21, or I don't know who else. Same thing, like, oh, I founded my business when I was 22, like, and you saw what they achieved, right? So it sounds like you're just in the right path.
Oh, I'm not going to compare myself to Steve Jobs. I
I'm
think,
just talking about the age,
yeah,
right?
yeah.
The age and the journey, like because most people, not most people, but I know like people in my life that are 50, around 50, 55. They're like, oh, now I'm gonna start my own company. Now I'm gonna start my own entrepreneurship and my own adventure. I'm tired of the 9 to 5 job, like, and you got that going for you very early on, and
Yeah.
that's a huge advantage.
No, absolutely. So from a young age, I realized that, and I think I don't even know where it comes from. A lot of people ask me, it's like, where does that mindset come from? Were you conditioned with it? Were you, and I suppose there might be a bit of nature versus nurture, but I've never ever had the 9 to 5 mentality. Like initially when I thought I wanted to work at BioWare, but then I actually used to run my own game studio as well alongside this business as well. So I used to make games called the Art. So I used to be part of a game studio that I founded with some of my fellow founders of the business when we were all university students called Tryhard Interactive, and we released the Ottoman Empire, the Otters, like otters as in sea otters, for Nintendo Switch, Xbox One at the time in 2020. And I experienced game development, but I think just being put into that entrepreneurial mindset straight when I went into university kind of conditioned me to not ever want to work a 9 to 5. And I've done it. I've worked plenty of 9 to 5 jobs, but there was always that hunger inside me that can never go away. And these were quite cushy jobs that I had. Like I could have lived a very comfortable life just staying at these companies, but I just didn't want to have regrets. I don't have regrets. I'm very fortunate. I can honestly hold my hands up and say I have zero regrets in my life because I don't see the point in regrets. You just learn from them and move forward. And that is something I will not have when I get older, is that I will never look back and think, what if? It's why I always just do it. Like, even if you fail, it's better to have tried than fail than never have tried at all. For example, like the TEDx announcement, what we did today, where we've announced that we're going to be hosting TED Talks for the games industry. Some people would have just looked at that and go, oh, there's so much bureaucracy. Like, like this conversation's been over a year in the making. Like, I say, you're getting this conversation raw off that today. And some people would have just been like, oh, I can't be bothered. It's too much bureaucracy. Like, I can't be bothered. And it's like, well, what if I think, what if? Like when I get on, and I've just always had that. Like I say, youth is the best time to do it. I always say that your 20s is your fuck up period. You can afford to fuck up in your 20s because that is the grace period. You have to just trial new things, whether that's building a business or just trying different careers or trying to do new hobbies. Not everyone wants to be an entrepreneur. Not everyone wants to set up their own business, but you should use your youth to your advantage to figure out who you are as an individual long before you actually figure out what it is. You've got the rest of your life to go work in a box office somewhere and do, do that. Like, find out what it is that you want to do. Like, yeah.
I'm sorry, the way you said go work in a box. There was something
I
funny about it. I'm sorry.
I know. I'll tell you what it is. Is I've got PTS. I have PTSD from a job that I had.
What
Where
happened, man?
I worked in an office that had no windows to the
What?
outside, no outside world. The building had no windows, so you couldn't see daylight, you couldn't see nighttime. And because we were working quite late a lot of the time, I would get into work, it would be dark. Because in Europe, as people who know Europe know,
Yeah.
it is that from like September onwards till like March, it's pretty dark in the morning. I don't know what it's like for you in Germany, but I imagine it's quite similar with you guys. Is that from October onwards, it gets really dark as you get into the
Yeah,
evenings,
yeah, it gets
and
pretty
then
dark.
yeah, and I was basically going to this office. It was dark. I was leaving. It was dark, and I was never ever seeing the sunlight because
Oh
I was
my
in and
god.
out. And I did that for nearly 3 years, and it just broke me.
What were
That
you
is what.
doing at the time? What kind of
So
job?
game development.
You're a level designer.
Yeah, well, it was a
Okay.
hybrid. It was actually a hybrid role of a community manager slash project manager
Ah,
at the
okay.
time. It was at an indie studio, and that environment made me hate box offices, and it's why the office we're moving into with Format Group has windows. That was non-negotiable. That was non-negotiable, and I cannot say this to anyone who works in that type of environment. Get a fucking window. It damages your mental health
It
so
does.
much.
It does.
It does, and you feel like you're missing out on life so much. Like it does it. Like for example, the room I'm sat in right now, I can look out my office. I can just see the sun is setting now if I look outside, but I only close those blinds when the sun sets. Like I like to see outside. It does so good for the human brain to see greenery, nature, and just life in general. And yeah, to answer your question, there's a bit of psychological trauma behind why I hate box offices, basically, because I spent 3 years in one, and it was like being in solitary confinement. It's not
Oh
great.
my But it does make sense, yeah. We had a doctor the other day. Oh man, I blanked. I forgot your name, sir. I'm sorry. But you were all about the circadian rhythm, right, of the human brain. It's necessary. You need to see sunlight. You need to have those sunshine lights, like the rays coming to your eyes
Yeah,
in the
absolutely.
morning. That's like essential for your mental health, essential for you to get a good night of sleep
Oh yeah,
afterwards. So yeah, I would say windows are pretty essential,
yeah,
But if the funny thing is, because we're not a programmer, right? Because if you can ask all the programmers, I remember from university, right? I went to game design university, and at work as well, like at the studio that I'm currently working on, all the programmers, they actually like the box, like shadowy environment. Like they always have their hoodies on, and like,
oh
what's
yes.
up with that? I don't get it.
Yeah. Well, I can fix that problem. They just need
You
to
can
come to
fix.
format, and then they'll realize very quickly that the only boxes they'll be in will be the mosh pits. Like that's the only, like format takes the introvert and makes them a socially extroverted introvert, so it makes progress. But yeah, I'm for it. Like for example, I don't look at my phone before I go to bed. That's one thing I try and actively not to do. First thing in the morning, I do not look at my phone unless it's to turn my alarm off. That's the only thing I look at my phone to do, because it's so good for you. You should expose yourself to fresh air every single morning. But I'm a huge advocate of that because of the stuff I've been through throughout my life. Is that I'm a huge advocate of mental health and just looking after yourself, because in this industry, as you'll understand this, it can be very technologically dominated industry. We spend a lot of time looking at screens, and that messes with the human body over time. For example, I'm sat down for the purposes of this podcast, but I work at a standing desk. Like I like to physically stand up. I look after my posture. I've got a balancing board, but that would have been very distracting for you to have had on this podcast to see me shifting left and right had we been trying to talk. But things like that I really advocate people to do. And then you're learning a bit about me here is that basically I want people to be happy and look after themselves, because especially in an industry which will destroy your spine.